Hi, I'm Ben,
And I'm Josh.
and this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 17.
Stalog 17, sir. Sorry, that's a impulse knee-jerk reaction from the Academy. I was a freshman
Awesome.
in
I'm
17.
I'm putting that Stallig 17 patch I took a photo of at the Academy in the notes.
Great. Terrible traumatic memories. That's fine. Just put them in the show notes. I'll never see them there.
So here we are, Josh, still under the COVID-19 coronavirus quarantine. How's things going at your place?
Things are, well, personally in the family are fine, but in the state they are ramping up and getting ever more present. Like our governor, Doug Ducey, he officially announced that all schools are going to be closed for the remainder of the school year, which we all kind of figured was going to happen. But then he also issued a stay-at-home, stay-indoors order that went into effect just this past week. So it's operationally, like logistically, nothing's really changed because everybody was kind of adhering to the CDC standards anyway. This was just like a little bit more pushed formal. Oh, he's actually shutting down, non-essential businesses. Now, he defined essential businesses very, very broadly. And a lot of people are complaining like, well, this doesn't really change what we were doing in the first place. But the point that I keep making to people is that no, it doesn't change what we were doing. But instead of us doing it voluntarily before, now we're being told to do it. If nothing else, this is just the governor acclimatizing his population to increasingly stringent restrictions in case this does continue to get worse.
Wow. Now, it's interesting that Arizona is just now going through this because Illinois did it like a week and a half ago. So
there's only really one. I think it has to do with the size of the metropolitan areas and just how much they've been exposed to the coronavirus, because a lot more people are traveling to Chicago than they are traveling to Phoenix. And so the number of cases
I was looking at the stats last
state,
night, and Illinois is like fourth on the list of U.S. states behind like New York, California, Michigan.
Right. And so it's just
Louisiana.
Yeah, it's a function of the number of cases and how fast they're starting to ramp up.
Yeah. I hate to get too political, but I would also venture a guess that it has something to do with the political leanings of the governor. But
we are a red state here in Arizona.
Yeah, and we're a blue state.
I wish maybe we had been a little more proactive, but it's all right. This is like I'm starting to see it more and more because like before there was fewer people out, but it wasn't really any different. This past weekend, I'm the only one that leaves the house to do any shopping that we need to do. And so I had to go to Home Depot for a project that I'm doing, which I probably shouldn't have under these restrictions, but I did anyway. So please don't arrest me, Governor Ducey. And then I had to go to the grocery store. And I took extra steps. Like I was wearing rubber gloves because I actually have like 2 boxes of black rubber gloves in not rubber gloves, like the nitrile, like the surgical gloves, but they're black. And I keep them in my garage for woodworking when I'm doing finishing work to keep, like varnish and like finishing and paint and stuff off of my hands. So I brought a box with me in my truck and I wore them when I was out and about doing things. But this is the first time I've seen like almost everybody had gloves. A majority of people had masks. Home Depot was doing a head count. They were only allowing a certain number of people in the store at any one time.
Wow.
Everyone else had to queue up outside. They had set up some of those big shade deals and they had big X's marked on the ground, like stand on this X, and they were all really far apart from everybody. So it was.
I've also seen like traffic patterns painted on the floors in stores. Like you can only wind through the aisles in this order so that you don't end up going opposite directions where you'll cross back on someone.
Oh, wow. We haven't gotten to that point yet. And I don't think anybody in this state would listen to that.
Yeah, I guess I don't know if there's people staying around enforcing it or if it's just a suggestion. It seems like a good idea if your point is just to let people in but keep them from getting near each other.
I will say that the grocery store hoarding had been getting better. Like people were starting to slack off on just, buying everything on the shelves for no reason until Governor Ducey announced the lockdown and then everybody went crazy again. And so we still can't get certain things.
Yeah. And I've heard rumors, founded or unfounded, about, this coming reckoning with things that we haven't had yet, like truckers going on strike because they can, or food not being able, the supply chain breaking down, or those kinds of things, which is just going to cause more panic and more buying. But then you end up with like garbage bags of moldy bread out on the curb, like I've seen on the internet.
Well, and you hear about things like that, and they're mostly clickbaity articles, people trying to get, drive attention back to their website or their news media outlet or whatever. And we always have to, I'm always telling people, you've got to calm down. Like these news medias and the articles and everything they just want you to panic or want to instill panic because they don't care about the ramifications. In reality, if some truckers go on strike, that's going to create an opportunity for other truckers to make more money or other people to jump into the trucking industry. Like, it's not like all of these systems are too big to just fall to pieces when one card gets flicked out of the bottom of it. Like, other people will step in to fill the role. Opportunities are created for business. And if anything, if there's ever an opportunity for profit, people are going to be there exploiting it.
Yeah. So last time I said something, and one of my listeners corrected me and said, because I'd said I don't know anyone that's doing like hoarding groceries kind of thing, and they were like, well, you kind of do, and they explained it to me, and I realized I kind of need to change the definition of what I was talking about. So I guess, as people are changing their priorities and looking at what they got, maybe if they just modified their behavior a little bit, but everyone does the same behavior modification just a little bit, it's magnified and it causes, no toilet paper for weeks on end.
That makes sense. So it's not necessarily, that makes a lot of sense. It's not necessarily the one person that's going to the store buying out all of the toilet paper. It's that everybody that goes to the store buys a roll of toilet paper whether they need it or not.
Exactly. And so then, if the store is based on selling a certain volume and the supply chain's queued up for that, then it just, if everyone modifies their behavior a little bit, then it completely throws off the whole system.
Wow, you're right, because then you've got to order from the supplier. The supplier they're doing just-in-time inventory tracking just like everyone else to maximize their profits, so then they've got a back order, and it just trickles back all the way to the source of people making this stuff in the first place. Yeah. And then it goes back to the amount of paper product that they can get into the manufacturing, which means how many trees can we cut down? And so everybody's got to ramp up because of this.
And the trickle-down effect of this is more global warming. No, I've seen the photos of, like the canals in Venice being clear and dolphins swimming, and it reminded me of that scene from Avengers, not Endgame. I think it was Endgame, where they were like, "Hey, I saw a whale swimming up the Hudson today," which is a notoriously dirty river that would never have that kind of thing.
That was Endgame, and my wife said the same thing. Like, she pointed out to me that apparently LA has been smog free for almost a week now.
I've seen pollution maps of China where the pollution's almost completely gone. Yeah, I mean, there's weird side effects of this kind of thing.
Yeah, there is a good comic I saw on the internet with the globe personified with arms and legs sitting on like an office or like a doctor's bench in a doctor's office. And then the doctor is some other planet. It's like, oh yeah, it looks like you got a bad case of humans. Take some of this COVID-19 and call me in the morning.
Oh, that's great. Now, you'd mentioned that you weren't seeing as many people out. And I would put a classifier on that and say that I haven't seen as many cars driving around, but it feels like more people are out of their homes than usual. Like more people out on walks and riding bikes and stuff like that. Have you seen that?
I've noticed a lot of people walking around. Like, because we go out and we take walks now, and we take the kids out for a bike ride every couple of days, and just I'm doing my normal running thing. But I'm not going to say I've seen more people. What I'm going to say is I've been out more to see other people, I think, is what's happening there. It might just be a confirmation bias thing.
So what's it like if you're running and you come across someone and you're going to, pass close to each other? Is it different than it used to be?
So our sidewalks are really wide, and I don't have too many problems with that most of the time. But if it's like a couple and it's clear they're walking next to each other and they're not going to make room for me because they're jerks and people do that, then I'll just step out into the road. It doesn't bother me. There's like a bike lane or something I can
But there's not kind of like this consciousness of you're breaking the 6-foot barrier when you pass someone on the sidewalk?
Not really. We try to stay away from people. I try to stay as far away from other people as is reasonable. Like, I'm not going to go running through like a green belt or cross the street or anything like that. Ridiculous, but just staying away from people.
Yeah.
I don't have a good answer for you on that one.
Yeah. So I realized, so I pulled a second 1-week stint in the crisis battle staff this week.
I wanted to ask Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because you said previously that you were probably going to be out of it for a long while, and you were out of it for 1 week before they called you back.
I took 10 days off. So, and then I signed up for another week. They're right now they're only giving shifts in threes and fours, but when you're going to night, switching your sleep schedule from nights to days, I don't want to be like 3 on, 4 off, 3 on, 4 off, or something like that. So I just volunteered to take a week in a row. So I'm coming up on my tonight will be my 14th day in the crisis battle staff, and there's only one other person that's done that many days. And I noticed something, while I was there the first week as this thing was just kind of kicking off and all the guidance was starting to flow down and it still hadn't really broken out yet as far as like actual infected cases. It was just more like we knew it was going to. And the pattern that it followed was eerily similar to something that happened to me way back in like 2005. I can't remember the exact year of Hurricane Katrina. I'll look it up later. But there was a time where I needed to go down to the Gulf Coast post-Hurricane Katrina. And I went down once that was just like a couple of weeks later. And I was there for some military training, but I ended up spending my weekends doing disaster relief for the Hurricane Katrina victims. And the first time I went down, it was like I went to a warehouse where they were staging relief supplies, and we were making sure that people got like bottled water and peanut butter and diapers and stuff like that. And then I went away and I came back like a month or two later and back to the same area. And I also spent my weekends volunteering disaster relief. And then I ended up doing things like reconstruction and, helping like paint houses and tear out ruined drywall and stuff like that. And it was interesting how there was just that couple of weeks time, but it really changed the focus of the disaster relief. And that's what I've seen here with what's going on with coronavirus, just skipping 10 days in the operations center.
Well, and this is something that I think the military does do right. Like, for everything you see in the movies, people, like whenever a disaster happens and like 10 seconds later there is a full-up military operations center that's all organized and everyone knows what they're doing, that's not usually how it goes. It takes the military, it's a large machine, and it takes a long time to ramp up. But when it gets going, it is very effective at solving problems. And then there are, like, it just naturally lends itself to, like you said, like the crisis battle staff stood up and you were slammed with the immediacy of the problems. Here's everything that we have to fix yesterday. But then once you've chewed through that, then that gives you the breathing room to start planning forward. And that's something that organizations like the military do really well, is start planning, okay, what's the next priority? How do we get this ball rolling? What's the next step?
Yeah, so last night, last night, as in before I slept, but it was 6 a.m. this morning, the general said something really fascinating to me. He's like, right now we're tracking all of these air crews that have been put into isolation because they've been exposed or they have COVID-19, and that's having an impact on our ability to do our mission. He says, but here in about 2 weeks, we're going to start having military members that have recovered from COVID-19, and now they are super crews. They don't got to follow any of the restrictions. They don't got to do anything. They can just fly missions.
Well, that's presuming then that the immunity for COVID-19 is long-term, that you can't re-catch the disease.
Sure.
Have we confirmed that?
Well, how would you recover if you weren't immune to it?
Well, that's a good point, but I mean, that's a good. I don't know. I'm not a doctor by any stretch, but I mean, the flu still exists, and I understand that there's different strains of the flu.
Yeah.
Or do we know that there's only the one strain of the COVID
That's
you
a
can
good
get?
question. I saw some speculative evidence that there were potentially additional strains, but right now nobody's talking about that. It's just the one.
Okay. Well, in that case, yeah, you're going to have these people that are now much more flexible that you had before, and you're going to have to adjust your ability to plan and utilize this extra resource that you're gaining.
Yeah, so last time I was in the center, basically the outbreak hadn't really begun in earnest. There was inklings of it in like Seattle and Louisiana and a couple of places, and we were just dealing with the administrative problems. There was a travel ban from, the president announced his travel ban from Europe to the U.S., and then the DOD banned all travel to level 3 countries, and it was just lots of administrative things that were causing people who were trying to move their families or get back home to get stuck somewhere, or just causing a lot of problems. And it was just lots of wrestling with the guidance. Well, since I took 10 days off and now I'm back in the op center, now the actual outbreak has begun in earnest. And every day, there's dozens of new cases of military members that have been infected and bases that are on lockdown and those kinds of things. And it's really changed what we're doing in the operations center from this initial just what's the problem, what are we going to do, to actually dealing with actual infected people and potential. There haven't been any deaths yet of military members who've got infected, but there's lots of second and third order effects of all that.
Wow. Well, as always, I find that incredibly fascinating, but I don't want to bore our listeners because we hit the COVID-19. I mean, we just beat that horse to death last episode.
But can I talk about one more thing before we move off of it?
One more, and that's all you get.
Okay. So last time I'd mentioned Asimov's 3 rules of robotics and how if you change the order of them, it creates things. I put a little graphic up on Facebook if you go look at it. It's pretty fun. It's basically if you change the order of those 3 rules, it's really terrible. And then I talked about how this crisis had changed the order of priorities for people. And you'd asked me to give you some examples of how I saw that happening in life. And so I thought of a few, and I wanted to see if you'd thought of any. So one is funerals. Like, oh my gosh, funerals. Like, there's been a couple of funerals happen since this, and it's like, no one's traveling. You're not going to gather in a group because the number one priority now is preventing the spread of the disease. But usually when a person dies, you make that the top priority. You stop work, you stop whatever you're doing, you go there to gather in a group and mourn the loss of the person. So that's one area I've definitely seen the priority change effect.
Yeah, I haven't had anybody in my life die recently, so I can't say how it's been affected by COVID-19. But yeah, that's an event that would have to be altered in some way in order to accommodate.
Yeah, like my grandma's really sick. She might die. She's 92 and she's getting towards the end. And if she were to die right now, I don't think anyone could go. Like we'd just take her to the funeral home and maybe do some kind of webcast or something, and that would be it.
That's kind of sad.
Yeah. So there's one other that's a lot different. I sent it to you. It was an email that came out from the military where because of the fact that all the gyms and doctors and barbershops are closed, they can't do all of the usual things they do surrounding military standards for fitness and grooming.
So yes, so that means you're just not going to weigh in anymore on the Bad at Magic Fitness Challenge?
Well,
he's just gonna let it go.
It's a good time to talk about that. But yes, and the military is so diehard about this. Like they sent out I sent it to you just so you could see how ridiculous it was. But this notification that you don't got to get your hair cut for a little while because you can't, and they had this 150 word preamble about how important it is that we maintain our high standards and that we don't just let this mean that we slack off and that kind of thing. But really all it was saying is commanders are authorized to deviate from dress and appearance of standards.
Yeah, well, this is the thing is everything that comes out in the military has to be worded in that way because there's going to be that 17-year-old two-striper fresh out of high school that sees, the grooming standards are relaxed, and he's going to try to show up to work the next day with a mohawk that's been spray painted purple because that's how these idiots are. Well, I got the email, boss. It said that there's no haircut standards anymore. That is not at all what it said. Yeah. Good try.
Yeah. But the problem with the couching it so reluctantly is that there's the opposite. There's also the military guys that are like, don't think this means you can deviate one bit from the standard. You figure it out.
Well, and that's the intent, right? Is by releasing it, and that's why they always get around this. Like, we're releasing control of these standards to the local commanders, and then now all the local commanders got to be eyeing each other like, all right, so who's gonna be the first person to slide from the real standard and be the real slacker here?
You got it.
Yeah. That's like those organizations where you don't get set vacation time or set hours. It's like they just say, just work as much as you think you need to work and just take the time that you need to take off. And in those organizations, they find that nobody ever takes vacation because it turns into this giant Mexican standoff where nobody wants to be the guy to take vacation.
Yeah, like the staring contest. Who's going to blink first?
Yeah. It's like, oh, well, Bob took 3 days of vacation in the last 2 years. Is he really dedicated to the mission here?
Yeah. I hate when we set up those kinds of things, and sometimes I'm willing to be the first one. And as you know, I've shaved my head for the last 20 years, and right now I have the longest hair I've had in 20 years. So
Yes, you have. In fact, before the podcast started, we had Skyped for a moment, and the first thing I said to you is I started swearing at you for the glorious head of hair that you've been shaving for the last 20 years. I am suffering from, like, okay, so I have baldness that's creeping up my forehead, and it's got these two large alleys. And I figured that'd be fine if it starts from one side, but no, somehow it also annexed the back of my head, and then that portion is also increasing in size. And I think they're just attacking my hair from both sides. I'm just going to be bald. I'm going to have the full Picard, where it's just hair on the sides and nothing on top here in the next couple of months. And you, Mr. Oh, I don't like hair, it's dumb, have this glorious, like, what's that guy? Fabio. You got this Fabio mane going right now. Jeez. It's disgusting. I'm so mad at you.
As Fabio as you can get and still be almost within military standards.
You do. I will say you do look 10 years younger with hair.
Yeah. Yeah. And doing this thing where I go in the battle staff means I'm sitting next to new people almost every night. And eventually the personal questions come up and they're like, so you got any kids? I'm like, yeah, about that.
No, I am not actually 28. Is this why you shave your head? Because you look like such a baby-faced young man?
Maybe. I don't know. But I think I think this is a good spot to put in a plug for the fitness challenge.
Yes. So badatmagic.live, we have a link right at the top of the website for the Bad at Magic Fitness Challenge. What Ben and I are doing from now until his PT test was scheduled, it was going until the Magic Fest Vegas, which is also probably canceled, until the end of August. What it is a system where you can log in and anonymously, like you just have a username showing, and it doesn't show what your weight is, it doesn't show what your body fat is, it just shows how much your body fat has changed over time. There are instructions for how to measure and instructions for how to put all the information in the system, and it tracks from week to week. What we're doing is just trying to be each other's accountability buddies. We're just trying to create this little community where we all support each other, going through the fitness challenge, trying to stay in better shape and trying to stay healthy. And it's even more important now with gyms and everything shut down. It's like you have to put more effort into it to stay in shape. So speaking of the fitness challenge, Ben, myself and some person, not Josh's wife, on the website, both weighed in. They measured in this morning, and we're doing okay. How are you and Alicia doing on this?
Okay. We did have she put in her measurements and she missed the deadline last week. I think I may have as well, and I'm not sure that the website caught up, but yeah. I definitely haven't had as much time to work out as I like, but also I compensate by not being able to eat. It feels like all I do right now is work and sleep. So I'm pretty much holding steady. Alicia's doing well.
Good. Well, I'm glad that you're setting such a good example by weighing in on time. Way to go, co-host.
All right, let's talk about the British word of the day.
All right.
Bad at English. So when we moved to England, my kids came home and they were talking about a word that the kids used at school that I'd heard before, but like it is sometimes, people emphasize a word differently. Just like the word bloody in England is a swear word, but in America it just means there's some blood on something. They don't use the word bloody nose to describe like when you get punched in the face. They call it a nosebleed.
I thought bloody was like the F word in England.
No, it's more like the D word.
We can't say that one on the podcast either, people. We're trying to stay family friendly.
So they came home from school and they're like, everyone's saying this word banter, but they say it banta because they don't use hard R sounds. They say banta. I'm like, well, I know what that means. It's just like playful talk. They're like, no, it's bigger than that. And basically they explained to me that this was like, it's very British cultural norm of never saying something nice about someone. Even if you like someone, or especially if you like someone, you're making banter with them by kind of a playful exchange of teasing remarks, but generally of a good-humored variety.
Okay. This is, I think this is something that we do. We just didn't have a word for it.
Yeah, you think that we do it until you get immersed in it. And let me tell you, I had a bad experience.
So, the nicest guy in the world didn't like making fun of other people? Tell me more.
Yeah. Well, wow, you went right to it. So I was on exchange with the British military, which meant I was in their units filling a job of a British person as if they were there. And in America, so sometimes I assume that our cultural norms transpose. So like in America, in our units, we have a weekly staff meeting where you get together with the commander, you review what the unit's doing, you look at what's coming up, and you cover any administrative business. And so I was starting to get in the battle rhythm of doing this with my new unit, and one of my troops that I supervised did something really awesome. Like, he engineered a solution for tactical communications to allow us to conduct defensive cyber operations in theater where that capability didn't previously exist, and it was just a giant vulnerability.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of buzzwords. I don't understand, but we'll press through that. He did something really awesome.
He did something really awesome. So in the staff meeting, when it came around to me and it was my turn to talk, I decided to highlight in front of all the people in the room how awesome my guy was and what he'd done. This is very commonplace to do in an American staff meeting. Hey, my guy did something really awesome this week. Everybody says, good job. Maybe you give him a coin or a token, or, it's noted, and then you give him a push for the next quarterly award or whatever. Well, okay. I just got done kind of explaining what he'd done, and it became clear to everyone in the room that all I was doing was saying something nice about someone, and there was this moment that felt like it lasted forever where it was just like crickets chirping. Like they were waiting for me to like give the punchline and say something bad about him.
That's funny. Okay.
And I'm staring around at all these blank faces and gaping mouths and realizing I'd violated a very fundamental cultural norm, which is you don't just directly and openly speak nice about someone in public.
Oh, so you should have called him like a bloody wanker first?
Yes, exactly.
Huh. Okay, I can get behind that.
Or couch it like it was all screwed up and it was his fault in the first place and he finally said it right.
I see. So it sounds like then in the British military, it's the opposite of the crap sandwich that we do.
Yes.
So in the American military, when you want to say something bad about somebody, you say something really nice about them first, then the bad thing, and then something nice at the end so you don't hurt their feelings. It sounds like in the British military, you need to say something really bad about somebody, then kind of slip in something nice about them, and then end on a bad note again.
Yes. So the way they show that they care is they give you a hard time, they tease you, they take the piss, whatever, So one area I found myself terribly awkward at this, and what you just anticipated a minute ago, is at farewells. In a farewell in America, you have a luncheon or something, and usually the ranking officer will have to stand up, present that person with a gift that everyone pseudo-voluntarily chipped in for, and say something nice about them. Maybe you tell an embarrassing story, but generally the preponderance of what that person's saying tends to be saying good things about the person as they're leaving. In Britain, it's the opposite. The more crap you tell about a person, the more you're signaling that you liked them.
So it's just a roast then?
Yes, exactly. And we're experienced with this as a roast. We call it a roast, and we like to hold them, but we're not as good at it as the British are. So my same troop, the one that I got in trouble with for trying to compliment in a staff meeting, was leaving, and I knew I was going to have to do one of these British-style roasts in order to send him off. And I bombed, man. I could not do it.
This sounds like the plot to a 20-minute 3-camera sitcom where the super nice commander's got to say
it was kind of like that. It felt like being a stand-up comedian having a bombing routine. It was just awkward and difficult. I wish if I could go back and do it over again, I would just do it the first way. Just like do it straight up American style and just compliment him and say nice stuff about him and let it be awkward in that way instead of me trying to do it their way and failing.
That sounds so awesome. I would pay to see money. I would pay to sit in the back of that room and laugh at how silent it was whenever you try to crack a joke.
Ugh, it was terrible. So the bad at magic, the bad at English British word of the day is banter.
Banter, not banter, banter.
Yeah.
Nice.
All right, so while we're being bad at things, let's be bad at parenting.
All right, I actually have a couple bad at parenting stories, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So 2 things that happened this week that I want to point out that were super cool was the first one was Nicole has discovered Minecraft. So my lovely wife, Nicole, has never been big on video games like at all, right? But being at home with the kids all day, my son really likes Minecraft. And so one day, like, he got her to play with her for a while. My son got my wife to play with him on the Switch, the Minecraft split screen for a while. And what was interesting about that is then my son left and went to do something else. And then I walked into the room and my wife is building a house in Minecraft. I'm like, hey, what are you up to? Oh, I'm just playing with Carter. And I was like, Carter's gone, right? And she like had to stop and like look around. And it was the first time she realized that she had been in there for a couple hours by herself. And so she has taken this recently with the being stay at home, has taken it to the next level. And she's building this giantly complex, elaborate, awesome Minecraft castle like into a mountain. Like it's incredibly impressive.
Okay.
It's funny.
I want to take a quick time out. So if you'd gone back 6 weeks in time and said to me, Ben, 6 weeks from now, Nicole's going to spend hours a day sitting on the couch playing Minecraft, I'd have said, no way, man. What universe is that going to happen in?
Yeah, that's not a thing. That's just, I wouldn't have never said that because this is clearly something that can't and won't ever happen.
Right. So and I've been using this to kind of contextualize how crazy the world's going like right now. Like I was looking up at the TV and I'm like, you know what? The CNN evening anchor is doing his broadcast from a webcam in his basement wearing a hoodie. If 6 weeks ago you told me this would happen, I wouldn't have believed you.
Yeah. So this is just one more point on your giant, elaborate Charlie Day map of conspiracy theory stuff and how crazy the world's gotten.
Yeah. So here Nicole's sitting on the couch. What kind of world is she building?
Oh, she's building a medieval castle. Like she found a giant mountain and put a castle on top of it, like just a little castle, and then started like made a level down into the mountain, and then hit a wall on the exterior of the mountain. So she put like a new wall on it, and then she kept dig down deeper and made a bigger one, and then dig down deeper, made a bigger one, then made an elaborate bridge to a neighboring mountaintop. And like this thing is enormous. Like she's already said that when she's done, like I'm doing air quotes here because art is never finished,
You're never
only
done,
abandoned.
yeah.
Exactly. So at some point I'm going to make her stop and we're going to video a walkthrough of this ridiculously elaborate thing that she has constructed and is still working on. And we'll put it up. I'm sure, like I won't tell her, but I'll just put it up on our YouTube channel and people can look at it there.
Yeah,
but it's incredibly legit, and she's got like
this sounds awesome. I want to see it.
Lanterns, yeah, it is. It's legitimately awesome. But here's the thing that she did that really tricked me up was the kids went to bed and she kept playing it. I'm like, hey, you want to watch a show? She's like, oh, in a little bit. Can you help me like with something in here real quick? Like I don't really play Minecraft that much. She's like, oh, just help me with this little bit over here. And Ben, she sucked me in hard. Like, I don't know what happened. We were up until midnight that night, and she's like, oh, hey, we should probably go to bed. I'm like, hang on, we're almost done with the suspension bridge.
Just one more turn.
Just one more turn, yeah. I'm like, ugh. So now, what's funny about that is now I have some vested interest in this. Like, she's got 99% of this thing built, and I built 1% like over here in the corner that she complains about. And my son still plays with her sometimes. And like the next day, he woke up, was like, oh, I'm going to play Minecraft. And this is before Nicole was awake. I go, okay, hey, that's fine. And I got on his level. I'm like, if you do anything to mess up anything mommy has made, you will be grounded from that Switch for the rest of the year. Like, no dynamite,
I'm having
no creepers.
Flashbacks of a sitcom or something where this exact scenario happened, where there was like a kid that like handed their dad the controller to the Nintendo, and then the next morning he wakes up and the dad's hair is all fried and he's like, get away from me, I'm playing this, I'm on level 43.
You are thinking of that 80s movie The Wizard, where they were at a truck stop or something at some vehicle repair station, and the old man was playing NES Zelda for the first time, and then his traveling companion came up and unplugged it. He's like, what are you doing? I had the red key. I was going to head to the second dungeon.
Yeah, maybe. I don't think that's maybe that was the first time that joke was done, but it wasn't the last.
Oh, no, that's been a running gag. So anyway, we are super vested in Nicole's Minecraft structure, so that's fun.
Well, I want to challenge our listeners here to chime in on the subreddit or on Facebook if you have examples of these things. Like if 6 weeks ago you had told me ... You know, what's something that you've seen happen in the world around you that if 6 weeks ago someone had told you this would be happening 6 weeks from now, you wouldn't have believed them?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head. If you told me 6 weeks ago that I would be at home all day, every day, and would enjoy taking walks with my kids, I'd have laughed in your face.
Yeah, that's definitely one.
Kids are the worst.
All right, so you sent me these really cool photos of you guys just, trying to keep it interesting, and you like set up a blanket in your driveway or in the tailgate of your truck and put a projector on the side of your garage. And what movie were you guys watching?
So I need to make this very clear that none of this was me. Like, I got sucked into this just as hard as, like, the pictures don't do it justice. But my brother, who is a hardcore extroverted person, is still finding ways to get his fix of social interaction with people. And so he's had a bunch of social distancing, like, engagements at his premises, which that's, whether it's correct or not, according to the standards, neither here nor there. Like, he'll have people come into his backyard, not touch anything, and stand like several feet away from him across a fire pit, and they just, hang out and talk. This was one of the things that he had done, is he set up a projector in his driveway, and then we set up a mattress in the back of our car, backed it into his driveway, popped the hatchback. The kids just laid down and were watching this movie. And in the pictures I sent, we had brought our inflatable couch that we have for other reasons. And we were going to sit and watch the movie. And it's funny because that's we were expecting. Like, we were expecting to pull up, sit down, and just watch it like it was a drive-through theater and never get anywhere near any of the other people that were there. But, like, my wife and I sat down, like, to watch the movie, and then my brother goes, "Oh, were you guys going to watch the movie, or did you want to come hang out with us?" And so we kind of like, "Oh, well, but it was Onward." I'm like, but it's Onward. I kind of want to watch Onward. But we didn't. We ended up hauling the couch off to the side away from the kids, and then sat like 10 or 15 feet away from my brother and his wife, and just hung out and had some other human interaction that we haven't had in a while. So it was really nice.
Okay. So your brother's one of those people I've been seeing photos of on social media where, like, they're all standing out at the street corner 6 feet away from each other, enjoying a beer and having a chat?
He has 100% been that person, yes.
Yes.
And then it's funny because then they talk, one of the discussion topics was, "Hey, are you guys doing okay? It's been crazy. I'm just like going just so psycho in my house." And Nicole and I look at each other like, "Yeah, it's been fine."
I'm fine.
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah. Alicia and I are kind of like you and Nicole. So even though you guys were watching Onward, let's talk about other films that were in theaters and got released early to video that now you're able to watch from home.
Do we have to?
Well, just like we've established this podcast as a place where we complain about Star Wars.
Okay. Yeah, so Ben is alluring to the fact that I saw Frozen 2 for the first time in the last couple of weeks. And like, I don't want to spend a ton of time. People know my opinion on the first Frozen movie, and I swear, like, everyone's like, "Oh, you just didn't like it because you liked the first one." I went into it with an open mind. I went into it like trying to be as objective as possible. Right, I tried. I tried to remove as much bias as I could. I sat quietly. I watched the movie up until a point, and then I completely fell out of it.
Yeah, you started heckling, didn't you?
Well, I can tell you the exact moment when I completely fell out of the movie and just gave up on it. But so Frozen 2, like, if you haven't, spoilers, people, because there's no way we cannot do this. It's everything. I feel like they took Frozen 1 and then just distilled it to the elements that people liked the most, and then took each one of those drops of the best portions or the most profitable portions and just stretched each one of them out until they had a feature-length film. That's all they did. So Frozen 1 was a soundtrack with some visuals that kind of strung together in a not very coherent plot. The same thing happened in Frozen 2, except there was, I think, twice as many songs. They all came at you twice as fast with like half the break between the songs each time. And just, So here's an example. One portion of the first movie, the Frozen, one little scene that I liked quite a bit was when Kristoff was with his reindeer out and like just when he first introduced the character, right? And he's got his guitar and he sang this little ditty to himself, and then he like filled in the voice as if his reindeer was accompanying him. And that song was maybe 3 or 4 lines. Like, it wasn't a full up song. It was just like a little thing to try to introduce the character.
Yeah.
But I thought that was very clever and very funny, him filling in for the reindeer making fun of him. I thought that was cute. In Frozen 2, they did a full feature-length song of Kristoff with Sven singing back to him.
Yeah, the traditional ensemble parade-style musical number with the reindeer.
So Ben, I was struggling through the movie up until that point.
I
But when
just
they
can't
did
wait
the
to
thing,
be king.
no, when they did the thing where Christoph is sitting like on a stump or something, looking off to camera left, and then they did the thing from the old '80s music video where then they superimposed a close up image of his face on the other side of the screen, looking to the other way, and they did like a full up Boys to Men music video with him and the reindeer. I was done. I was completely done. I'm out.
So this was the moment. This was
that
when
was
you were giving it a chance and transitioned
Yeah.
to Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Yes, this at that moment it was like I gave up. I'm like, this is no longer a movie. They are straight up just putting a music video in the middle of what is supposed to be a movie. I'm done. I cannot take this seriously anymore.
Yeah.
Oh, there was some, and then like that was like production and director's choices. I get that was very popular. Whatever. I could also nitpick all day about plot points, about how nothing in the movie made sense, moving from point A to point B.
Last time you had a couple of people that wanted to defend it to you, but really it's indefensible. I don't think there's anyone out there that's going to try to tell you this made sense or that it was...
If you want a movie, like at the very bare minimum, you should have an idea of where your characters are physically in the world, right? There is a scene towards the end where Elsa is in the secret sacred river that has all the memories or whatever. And I kept asking, like, she's singing this great song about self-discovery or whatever.
They just stopped animating the background. She's just like in this vague, like, dark, obscure place.
She went into this little cave, and all of a sudden now she's in this enormous, undefined, limitless black void. And throughout the entire song, I just kept asking my wife, where the crap is she right now? I have no concept of where she is physically in the universe.
Yeah, well, as if they didn't have enough ways. So let's talk about the magic system. Because I thought maybe they would try to, as they were developing the backstory of the conflict of the land and the history of their parents, I thought maybe they would try to rein in what they'd done in the first movie and define the limits of the magic system. And they did the opposite.
No, yeah, now she has time travel powers.
Yeah,
on top of making immortal snowmen, on top of controlling the weather for large reaches of geographical space, of being able to freeze giant... Okay, so there was a part where she was struggling to get over a wave. In the first movie, I'm pretty sure she stomped pretty hard and froze the entire bay solid. Like, let's forget that happened, I guess. But now she can put her hands on the deck of a long shipwrecked boat, pull all of the water molecules out of all of the wood, which would make the entire thing disintegrate, by the way. And then somehow see a visual representation of what happened in the past at a specific point that she picks, but also hear the audio of what happened selectively from that time. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah. She is the Green Lantern of Disney magic.
That's that. I kind of like Green Lantern, but you're right. There's just whatever you feel like.
Anything you can imagine that you can do.
Yeah, just Ben, just so bad. And then they, like you said, they were trying to they're trying to sneak in like the origin story of her powers. It's like, oh, she's one of the elemental spirits. Oh, and what are the elemental spirits? Earth, fire, wind, and water, and now ice. So earth, fire, wind, water, and water again. Those are the elements.
Yeah. Well, okay, so this is the softest of magic systems, no rules whatsoever. And I think you'd sent me a text that was like, this was just written by a focus group. I've never seen a better example of a film written by a focus group. Just like, people like Olaf, all right, more Olaf. People like the talking reindeer, okay, do that. People like the unresolved tension of Kristoff and Anna not being married. Okay, we'll make it last the whole movie.
The whole thing just, it hurt to watch, Ben. Now, all of this aside, people don't get on my case about this. I do like the music from the movie. Like, as a movie, it is terrible. It is garbage. It shouldn't exist. As a soundtrack, it's fantastic. You should go download it and play it all the time.
Yeah. We've been singing it around the house.
Oh, yeah. We've been singing around the house nonstop. My wife, the other day, we were teleworking, both of us, at our desks, and she hummed the first bar of the lullaby thing about the river. And then she hummed one bar of it, Ben, and my daughter, in the other room, at the top of her lungs, picked up right where my wife left off and started singing the whole song.
I love Olaf's like Broadway style song where he sings about, when you grow up, everything will make sense. That song's fantastic.
Yes, it makes absolutely no sense when he sings it in the movie. It has no pertinence or bearing on the situation that he's in whatsoever.
Right.
But as a song, it's really funny.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, it was almost like there was two separate teams working, and that team actually came back with a really good product. And they're like, well, this is a really good product. It doesn't mesh at all with what we were doing over here in animation, but we'll squeeze it in.
That's what this is. That's what happens. They started with the music, and then they handed it over to the writers and said, okay, make all of these songs fit together somehow. And that's when you get this train wreck of a movie that makes no sense.
All right, let's put a bow on this.
Oh, F minus, the worst grade ever.
So if I sounded distracted while you were telling me a part of that, it's because my phone is freaking blowing up right now. Blowing up.
Are people already hearing us talking about Frozen 2 and trying to defend it?
No, not that at all. I'll read you the message I got. Effective immediately and to the greatest extent possible, all individuals on Scott Air Force Base will wear protective face coverings when they cannot maintain 6 feet of social distance. In public areas, commissary, base exchange, or work centers, interim cloth face covers are approved. Now, we got to throw in the dress and appearance piece. Until military departments issue further guidance on wear for service members, these face masks should be self-procured and remain conservative in nature while in uniform.
Ben, tell me you've got one of those bandanas that's like a skull face that you can wear.
Oh man, I totally do.
You've got to take it with you. And
so
then
I got to go to
off.
work here in about 2 hours, and I'm going to see what I can come up with that's going to fulfill this requirement that I just got sent. And this is through the official military notification system where I have to like reply that I've acknowledged the message and all that kind of stuff.
Ben, you and I both know, just take an old sand-colored T-shirt that you wear underneath every single uniform, cut a sleeve off it, and shove that over your head.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Well, all right. Frozen 2 interrupted by the real world. Dang, COVID-19. Can't I even have my rant about Frozen 2?
Apparently not. So let's transition to the last thing that we had queued up for today.
This is going to be our major topic for today. And so in the same vein that you interviewed me about the Academy, and we touched on barely 10% of the things that went on there. I would like to interview you, sir, about some crazy nonsense about your past that I just don't understand and would like to know more about.
Okay.
And that is the fact that you joined some kind of weird cult that took you in, told you exactly how to dress, told you exactly what to say, trained you in foreign languages, and then sent you into the world ill-prepared and under-equipped and told you to convert other people to your same crazy cult. That's about what happened.
The United States Air Force?
Oh, burn. He turned it around on me. No, I'm trying to couch this in the lightest and dumbest way possible. But in reality, I need to know more about your service as an elder when you went on your mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Okay, so I love the way that you kicked this off because I do want to keep it lighthearted. Now, I think it's interesting that, for somebody like yourself that isn't a member of the church but has kind of around your periphery, probably throughout your life, you've been exposed to people. Like you probably had friends growing up, you knew guys at the academy, you have in-laws, those kinds of things, where you just kind of have this ancillary knowledge of, you went and saw the musical.
That's right. I did see the Book of Mormon, so I know all about how this works.
Right. So this is going to give you some interesting questions. So go ahead.
All right. So when we were first talking about this as a discussion topic for the podcast, I honestly was skeptical. I'm like, oh, how interesting could it really be? But then when I was discussing it with my wife, she actually brought up a lot of good points. And there's a lot of things around being a missionary that I am actually very interested in. Like the message itself, obviously, that is important. I understand that's the core of this. But what I'm really interested in is not necessarily like what you said to people while you're out there, but like just how that all fit together in the first place. Because this really is like a hardcore 2-year-long military deployment where there's got to be some central tracking system that like knows who's coming into the pipe, like trains and equips these people to go, sends them out, keeps track of them while they're gone, and then somehow reintegrates them back into normal life when they're finished.
Yes,
and like
all those things.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cage it like that. I'm going to break it down, and we're going to interview you in stages of assuming this is some kind of like military style deployment to a foreign nation. And we're going to start with the before. We're going to go to what happens while you're there, and then we're going to ask what happens afterward.
Okay. Go.
So the first thing is I need to know about the logistical tracking, because obviously there are slots, or there are, positions out in the world where these missionaries, are we calling them missionaries, or am I supposed to call them something
missionaries
else?
is a great way to call it, because it's elders and sisters.
Okay, perfect. So it's the gender neutral term. So there are slots that these missionaries have to fill. And so then there's got to be some central office that tracks who's currently in the slot, when they're slated to leave, and when their replacement's going to get there. So at the very beginning, though, all of these are filled by kids, like teenagers coming out of high school before college. So they're 16, 17, 18 years old?
Yes.
So when does the church start tracking these kids? Like, are you supposed to give a copy of their birth certificate when they're born, and then they go into the system like, okay, well, you had a kid in 2002, so 2020, we're expecting to see your application for the mission.
Okay, so I don't know where to start. So there's a very deep-rooted cultural practice in the church that is all young men are expected to serve a mission when they become old enough, and that young women can if they choose. The age for young men used to be 19. They recently lowered it to 18, and the age for young women was 21. They recently lowered it to 19. And that I bring that up because it caused this surge of particularly more women going recently. Right now, the static number of missionaries prior to COVID-19, the static number of missionaries in place around the world is approximately somewhere between 70 and 80,000. And they have those divided up into geographic units by run by a single mission president that has usually somewhere around 200 missionaries under his care. And every month there's probably a turnover of about 15, as 15 people finish their 18-month for young women or 2-year for young men mission and go home, and 15 more new recruits come into place. And so he has this constant turnover of the 200 people within his care in the geographical area that he's responsible for. So from when you're very young, they encourage you to go. It's self-funded. It's church-run. And when you get of age, you send in your application to Salt Lake City. They screen you for things like, medical problems that would require special care, or history of mental problems, or have you had your wisdom teeth pulled out, or those kinds of things, so that if they send you to some far off place, you won't become a problem. And then they just try to meet supply to demand and make sure that the influx of new people is filling the people going home, and keep this healthy flow of young men and young women going throughout these 400 missions all over the earth.
Okay, so this brings up one of my first questions then, is the selection criteria. Because with, what'd you say, 40 to 50,000 missionaries at any one time?
80,000.
80,000. So I was under, so there's 80,000 missionaries with turnover of only 15 a month. So, and if all young men are encouraged to actually do this, then my question becomes, there's got to be more supply of missions than there is demand of missionaries. Like there's got to be more applicants than they can possibly take. Is that true?
No, they generally don't turn anyone away.
But how is that possible? Like, is it just the numbers just work out that way? Or if they get an influx, do they just open up a new mission somewhere else?
Exactly. They can just, if you had 200 in this mission, maybe we got 210 this month. And there's other things going on. Like, for instance, let's say Brazil changes their waiting period for visas, and now it's 6 months instead of 3. All of a sudden, you've got 3 months worth of missionaries in the pipeline that can't report to Brazil. So you send them to California for 3 months while they wait for their visa.
Holy crap. I didn't even think about the foreign restrictions that you have to keep up on for this. Like, that's another thing. Like, so there is some kind of operations center in Salt Lake City somewhere that's just keeping track of all this.
Absolutely. And the way it was in your academy, where you were like there and you were going to find out what your AFSC was and what your first base was, it's very much like that. It's a ritual event, and I'll find some great montages they've got on YouTube, basically where, like, if you're a young man, you go to your local ecclesiastical leaders, you declare your eligibility, you put in your paperwork, and then there's this waiting period where your paperwork's gone to Salt Lake City and you're waiting to find out where on the whole earth they're going to send you, what language you're going to be speaking, and it's exciting. Like, it's really exciting. Like when I remember when I was 18 or 19 and I was waiting for my mission call, I was thinking I could go anywhere on earth. Where am I going to go? And my mission call came back and I opened it up and it said, Dear Elder Rich, you're hereby called to serve to the English speaking language in the Oregon Portland mission. And I was like, oh, man.
Wah, wah. You should not have been disappointed. You should have been happy for the opportunity to serve the greater good.
Yes, and you are right. That is the ecclesiastical attitude, and that is the attitude I showed. But I was a little bit disappointed. I wanted to go somewhere and speak a foreign language and do something exotic. But I got to do that later in my life. And I enjoyed my 2 years in Oregon.
Okay, good. Well, and this brings up another question: is how does the selection process, like, is it completely random, like where you get assigned, or is there some kind of a board sitting like, ooh, this guy is super nice, and if we sent him anywhere outside of the United States, he's going to get eaten alive. So let's send him to Oregon.
Yes. So yeah, there's a logistical problem. Like, where do we need people right now? There's all the concerns I said about like medical conditioning and those, and acclimatization and those kinds of things. And then there's also an element of of faith, that we believe that there's people somewhere in the world that you need to connect with, or an experience you need to have as an individual, and the person conducting all of this planning isn't just a logistician there or a personnelist. They're also a member of the church with keys and authority and inspiration from God. So you believe that when you get your call, it's from God.
I see. So infusing it into this process of from my perspective as a layperson, they are kind of using that as a way to, I'm not going to say justify, but kind of explain, or kind of like, oh, I didn't want to go to Oregon. And that kind of cuts out the complaining too. Like if you come back and say, well, I didn't want to go to Oregon, I wanted to go to Japan.
But the Lord needs you in Oregon.
But the Lord himself told you to go to Oregon. Do you really think the Lord himself is making a mistake here?
Right. So I go there in search of why did the Lord send me here? And it kind of like you said, it cuts out the complaining.
Yeah, it cuts out the complaining and encourages you to be even more open-minded while you're there. Very interesting brainwashing techniques they're using here.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if we did that with like airmen who got sent to Minot for their first base, or got sent to, Thule, Greenland, or something like that. You get to go be a security guard on the northern end of Greenland.
It's like, oh, you're so lucky. There's going to be so much opportunity for you to find yourself there. It's like, yeah, we don't. Exactly. We don't. We commiserate. No. It's like, you got Minot. Sucks for you. Clovis, New Mexico. You might as well be dead. Okay. Yeah. So when does the tracking actually start? Like you have to, like you said, when you go into your local branch of the church and you declare. Do you declare like Steve Carell declared? Like, do you stand up in front of the congregation? I am ready for my mission.
Not at all. It's just a quiet administrative thing where you go into your local ecclesiastical leader, and there is some screening. The screening isn't just like medical and functional. There's also some worthiness screening. Like, if you see this, I was interested about that, because if there's people that this legitimately would not reflect the faith in a good way, yes, how do they get pushed out of the system? Like, it's right at the beginning. Like if you have if you're married or have children, it's out of the question. You have to be single and no children. So
that makes sense, because like there's some chance that you're not coming back from this.
Right. If you got a criminal record, probably not. We believe in forgiveness, but there's just certain things where they're just not willing to take the risk anymore.
Okay.
There's a 20-question interview where they basically sit down and ask you, do you believe in the church? You support what we're doing? Can you support the leaders? Are you willing to make all these sacrifices? And then there's personal questions about, like what your personal life kind of stuff.
Right. But then the local leader can flat just turn you down.
Yes.
The first line of defense is the person that should theoretically know his congregation the best. I guess that makes sense. Like, the structure already exists to kind of pre-screen the candidates anyway.
Yeah. Just like the military. You got a local recruiter that's
like... Oh, please. The local recruiter is incentivized to send everybody he possibly can. This is no way and shape the same.
It's similar in that functionally, there's this distributed filtering that happens, and then this central management of it.
Yeah, that is similar. The structure is similar. The incentives and the justifications within the system are entirely different.
Yes, and the outcomes as well.
Got it. And the other question I was going to ask at this logistics standpoint was the funding, but you mentioned it's all self-funded.
Yeah, so let me tell you about that. So back prior to right about the time I was born, it was self-funded in that you would send your eligibility to the central place, and then they would tell you where you would go, and then you just got it, and you had to pay for wherever you went. So if you went to South America, you could live on $50 a month, and it was probably pretty reasonable to save up for it. But if you got sent to like London or Tokyo, and it was going to cost you $8,000 a month to live, you were just screwed, or you had to live like a homeless person. So
wow. So, but there's no way that you could at that point be like, well, I can't afford to go there.
That could happen, and I'm sure it did. In fact, there was a recession in the early '80s, and at that time, the preponderance of the missionaries were from the United States, and so they actually kind of backed it off and reduced the term of service from 24 months to 18 months. Well, about that time, somebody had the brilliant idea, because a lot of the overhead the missionaries were facing were things like...
You're going to tell me that somebody set up a student loan issue program.
Kinda. So what they did basically is they said, well, how about if we just have everyone contribute to a central pot of money, and then we can even out the cost for people who are going to low-cost places versus people who are going to high-cost places, and just apportion it according to need.
Oh, so it's a pyramid scheme.
No.
As long as people keep coming into the system, everybody benefits.
No, not at all. If it costs $4,000 a month to live in London and it costs $100 a month to live in Peru, you add those together and divide by 2. And,
$2,050.
Right. And then each person pays $2,050, and you can both go on a mission. Well,
so one more thing for the logistical center of this place. What is this headquarters called? There's got to be some cool acronym for it.
The missionary department.
Oh, that's not nearly as cool as it should be. We'll come up with a better name for it later. People, we want suggestions for what this place should be called. But one of the functions there is just tracking the overall cost of this program, dividing it by however many applicants are coming in, and sending out invoices.
Yes, but I'm sure the church subsidizes it heavily with tithing funds, because right now, like for my son in California, I pay $400 a month, and that pays for everything, room and board and everything.
That's good.
Right. So the entire cost of his 24-month mission was just like $6,000. There was public math.
I am gonna ask you specifically about like living conditions and things, but that's for the during. We're still in the before portion.
Oh, that's $9,600. So $9,600, your total cost of living for 2 years, with a little bit of overhead for like the uniform that you got to buy before you go. But other than that,
yeah, I'm pretty sure that's rent for like a month and a half in any normal Californian house.
But $10,000 for 2 years of living and an unforgettable life experience is an incredible bargain.
So you, Mr. Six Dependents, this is yet an additional thing beyond college savings. You also have to have mission savings on the logistic end for the parents now.
But if he was living at home, would he be costing me, more than $400 a month?
I mean, maybe if he's 19, he should be out of the house, right? Like when they turn 18, you just kick them out to the curb.
They recently, and they don't do this very often, they changed the amount. It went up from $400 to $450 a month, right about the time that my second son was preparing to leave on his. So I currently have 2 missionaries in the system. My oldest, who will be coming back soon, and my second, who's just leaving.
Wow. We will get there. The next thing I wanted to talk to you about was training, because you can't just send these kids like, okay, well, you are a missionary. Now go spread the word. There's got to be like a standardized approach. There has to be certain standards and restrictions that they live under. Yeah. And so you have to train them on all of this stuff. So where is missionary boot camp?
Okay, so the Missionary Training Center, and using the term boot camp is exactly right, because there's several things going on. One is just you got to make sure they got the basics, and they have the appearance and the conduct and stuff. And the other is to kind of acclimatize them to what this is going to be like. So for the longest time, there was just this central missionary training center, and I'll post a photo in the notes, in Provo, Utah, right next to Brigham Young University. Nestled up against the mountains. It was this giant campus. Everyone that was going any mission anywhere in the world would report to the Missionary Training Center in Provo, Utah. And there they had a giant language training mission where, wherever you were going to go, if you're speaking a foreign language, you get like foreign language boot camp. Like from the minute you get there, they make you speak your foreign language 24 hours a day. And they have people who are probably returned missionaries from that mission and fluent in that language. And the language training function alone is world renowned for how effectively in a very short period of time you can take someone with no exposure to a language and make them relatively functional. And then on top of that, then there's the ecclesiastical piece. You get there and they're kind of giving you the pep talks and making sure you understand what you're going to be doing, what the reasoning behind it is, how to go about it, what the system is, and preparing you. So if you're going to an English-speaking mission, it's typically 3 weeks at boot camp. When I went, it was 4 because they also had us operating in a call center where at the time the church had an advertising campaign where people were calling an 800 number to request a free copy of the Book of Mormon. So I was working in a call center, and then I was
okay. So just you went for 4 weeks because they had you serve for a week in a slave labor call center.
Yeah. And then after your 4 weeks, then they send you out to the field. So of my 24 months, only one was in boot camp. But for someone going, to a difficult overseas language mission, they might have you stay for 9 weeks, I think, before you go out into the field.
Wow. And then that's part of the missionary time. So it's not like you're just going to be serving longer because you have harder training.
Right. It's part of your time.
I see. Okay. And then that's where you learn not only, like you were talking about, the language, but then also the actual message. Like you need this is the information you need to be dispatching to people.
You got it.
I'm assuming methods for dispatching it as well.
Yes, all of that.
All right. So it's not it. So then it's like, what is that? Seminary 101, and then also sales 101.
Yes, both. Now, I mentioned earlier that back in the 80s, the preponderance of missionaries were coming from the United States. Back in the late 90s, the tipping point was reached where more members of the church live outside the United States than live inside the United States. Okay. And so as the missionary program has grown, they've realized that it's expensive to send people from all over the world to Provo, Utah for boot camp and then send them back out to wherever they are in the world. So they've started to build satellite missionary training centers. So there's one in Mexico, there's one in, I think, Brazil, there's one in England. They're all over the place now. So my son was going to report. He had a mission called to the Chile Antofagasta mission, and he was going to report to the Missionary Training Center in Mexico City a week ago tomorrow, except for the fact that the coronavirus called everybody home, and right now he's training remotely over the internet from home.
But he's still planning on attending his mission in Chile.
He is currently, his clock has started. He's a set-apart missionary. He's following the missionary rules. He's wearing the name tag. He's begun his training.
But he's still living at home.
Yes.
Man, you just can't get that kid out of the house, can you? So how is that helping when he's trying to learn, what do they speak, Portuguese in Chile?
It's Spanish.
Oh, it's just Spanish. Okay, so does anybody in the house speak Spanish? That's not really helping his language training.
No, he's going on webcasts and stuff like that. But I should be making him, anytime he talks to me in English, I should be like, no!
And that's like the one Spanish thing that you know. Yeah. Well, all the Spanish I know is like bad Mexican Spanish, which is not to say that it's different from Spanish. It's just colloquial to Mexico versus
all my
Spain.
Spanish is from my time working at Taco Bell.
So you probably know all the curse words that I do. All right, well, that's interesting. Now, here's one question I wanted to ask you is that some of the places that people get sent on these missions are not safe. Like we lay people hear in the news all the time of people going missing or disappear because they're trying to they're trying to be the world's nicest door-to-door salesman in countries racked by, just organized crime and drug kingpins and civil war and, humanitarian aid crises. So is there any training that they get for like self-defense, or is there like POW style training where like if you get taken, this is what you need to do?
I'm going to take two approaches to this.
Kidnapping insurance, that's got to be a thing.
Yeah, maybe. One approach to this is that there's a very there's very much an element of faith in that we understand that we're going to dangerous areas, kind of like was depicted in the musical, but that we live a very clean and pure life and maintain this image of ministers who are representatives of Christ, kind of like the Catholic priest who lives in the bad neighborhood. He's got like this diplomatic immunity. That's not okay, but I'm overselling that part of it. We're not just carelessly sending, 18-year-old kids into dangerous areas, hoping that the fact that they're wearing a name tag that says the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is going to save them from actual danger. The church takes very seriously dangers to the missionaries, and this is an example. Like right now, I'll put some links on the internet, but they brought most of the missionaries home right now from all over the world because of the coronavirus. And in any area where like political unrest breaks out, they'll frequently close the mission and move the missionary somewhere else.
Does the church have a team of specially trained like operators, like SEAL Team God, that can go in and get these kids out?
Okay, so organizationally, the 400 missions are each run by a mission president, and the mission presidents are selected very stringently the way a wing commander would be. They're typically 50 to 60-year-old men who have been like business executives. They also pay their own way and are volunteers, but they tend to be highly successful, experienced executive professionals, and they manage their group of 200 missionaries. So while amongst the 200 missionaries, there's just kind of a hierarchical leadership of the blind leading the blind. At the top is the mission president. He has a staff and a direct line of communication back to headquarters, and he's watching out for their health and safety.
So you haven't said no. Is there a SEAL Team God?
No, there's no SEAL.
Okay. Well, so this is I understand, like, when it comes to like you're going there based on faith. The whole mission is based on faith, and like you have to have, if you're going into a dangerous location, you have to kind of put your faith in not only the system but then also in higher powers that they're going to see you through, right?
Yes.
That seems like, so again, I'm not trying to down talk or be mean or anything. I'm just going to be the devil's advocate. Like, actually, yeah, that's funny. But like, to a point, you have to acknowledge the reality that there's going to be situations where the armor of God just isn't going to get you through this.
Okay, let me tell you a handful of stories.
Okay.
So there was an experience of a couple of missionaries that were in Russia. One of my best friends went to Russia. They got made into a film called the Saratov Approach, or the Khartov Approach, some Russian word and then approach, where they were abducted and held for ransom.
Okay. That's kind of the situations I'm talking about. Yeah.
The film is about their journey of faith. There was a lot of conflict going on where like they were trying to decide if they were going to pay the ransom or not. There definitely wasn't ransom insurance. And ultimately these two young men got out on their faith. They were released by their captors.
Yeah, but again, devil's advocate over here. For every win that you hear about and every movie that they make about it, there's got to be 10 that you don't hear about where the missionaries just silently disappeared forever.
So when I was in, when you and I lived in Virginia in 2005, there was a shooting not far from where we were. There was a couple of missionaries. They're out proselyting. They turned a corner. They witnessed a gang shooting, execution style. And the person conducting the shooting saw the missionaries, decided they were witnesses, and started firing at them. The person that was shot that they witnessed lived, but one of the missionaries was killed.
Oh, you see, and that's the kind of thing, like, there are bad things that happen in the world, and in some of these circumstances, you're sending these kids to the worst possible locations. Like, is that not irresponsible at some point?
That's a good question. I mean, there really is an element of faith here, that we go to any area in the world where we believe that the children of God are in need of the gospel of Jesus Christ, and we try to keep our missionaries safe, and we, don't send them into areas where it's obviously, just too hot and unsafe. But everywhere you go, there's danger, even at home, where if you don't leave in the first place.
Okay, so this is, I'm going to tell you right now, that's the step where faith starts to make less and less sense to me. When you start to, I'm not going to say, when you acknowledge all of the facts of the circumstances, but then you just accept and are willing to let something that you can't quantify, like, fill in the gaps of your preparedness. That's where I really start to hard question, like, the decision making. I'm
understating the actual level of involvement. Like, the mission president that's responsible for 200 missionaries, has a relatively small geographic area, and he isn't alone. He has a staff, and he's connected with all of the local leaders of the church organization that exists in that part of the world.
Okay.
There aren't just missionaries out there alone and afraid in dangerous areas without any support or understanding of the situation they're in.
All right. Well, actually, this is an excellent transition to how it works during. So you go to I'm going to call it Fort God, and they through boot camp, and then they ship you out to your final location. What is the like you said? They're not out there on their own because some depictions of the system feel like that. But there's got to be some kind of accountability, like reporting chain and report, and just they've got to be able to talk to people and tell them and just stay on the true and narrow. So what is the reporting system? Like what are the duties and responsibilities of the missionaries back to home base while they're out there?
So as a veteran, you'll understand this, that it's very much like the military in that there's this hierarchical chain of command. So at the top is Salt Lake City and the missionary department, and then below that are the mission presidents distributed geographically that are very much like wing commanders. And then below that is an organization made up of the missionaries themselves that are kind of selected during their service for their propensity for leadership and their ability to follow the rules and conduct the work. And at the top is zone leaders, and there's roughly 5 zones in a mission of 200 missionaries. So there's like 40 missionaries in each zone, and in those zones there's districts that are somewhere in 10 to 20 missionaries, so there's the mission, the zones, and the districts, and that's a group of about 10 missionaries. But the most fundamental unit of a mission is a companionship, and that's something that doesn't exist in the military. And that is every single missionary is assigned a companion, if you're male, obviously same gender companion, and then you are to remain with that person throughout your mission 24/7. And at the heart of that is just probably some practical and faith-based experience. The Lord said in the Bible that in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses shall every word be established. So you're out there to be a second witness of what you're doing, and also to just keep each other safe. Buddy system, to stay out of trouble, everything you can imagine.
Yeah, it does. It goes both ways. One, it works as the accountability buddy to make sure that you're keeping track and taking care of your partner here. But at the same time, it's that Mexican standoff again. Who's gonna slip first?
Right. And not only that, but then there's also a seniority kind of thing happening. Whereas you got people rotating in, out, and through, there's always this influx of new people. So what the mission president does is he's getting a new crop of 15 guys coming into the mission. He picks 15 experienced missionaries out in the mission and assigns them as trainers and says, next month when your companion leaves, you're going to get a greenie, a new guy, and your job is to initiate him, train him and get him ready to go.
Oh, I didn't realize that the accountability buddies are on different schedules. I assumed that they were paired up at boot camp and sent out.
Nope. There's this constant rotation happening. So during my 2-year mission, I moved around to 6 or 7 different areas, and I had like 15 different companions. So when I arrived, I was introduced to my trainer. We were together for about 3 months, and then he left, and then a new senior missionary came in. Basically, the way they set it up is so that you never whitewash an area, as in have both persons leave at the same time. So always there's been someone there that lives there for who's been there for at least 2 or 3 months.
Okay, so there's some bit of turnover and experience in the geographical area.
Right, that you're assigned to.
That's interesting. But then they moved you, like after you've been in the area for a while, like you said, you were there for 3 months and then your guy left and then a new guy came in and then you stayed there for another length of time. Did they move you geographically after that?
Yes.
Now,
so
what's the purpose of moving you after you've had experience in the area, though?
It's very much like the military, how they move you around. It's just to give you a breadth of experience, maybe help you find a connection with the person, learn different things, try different things. So like when I got to Portland, I was pretty close to the city center from my first area. And then from my second area, about 5 months later, they sent me all the way to the other side of the Cascade Mountain Range to Bend. And it was like rural, and it was very different.
Okay. And all right. So they're just moving you around, new set of eyes on things. Maybe you'll strike up a conversation with a guy that wouldn't be possible if it was somebody else. Okay. I can get behind that.
Exactly.
So then what reporting requirements did you have as a mission to your zone boss?
Oh man, that's a great question. Okay. So it's changed a little bit, the focus, but there's very much a culture surrounding this where if you got a group of 19-year-old boys who are out there, they've gotten 3 weeks of boot camp and sales tactics, and then you just sent them out and left them on their own for 2 years, it would be chaotic. So,
yeah, it would be sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Yeah, there's very much a structured system of continued accountability based on statistics. So there's performance measures set up around all of the things you're trying to do. How many contacts have you made? How many? It
Yeah.
probably looks like a sales system, and it's
Yeah,
probably because the executives that set it up did sales.
I am very much imagining a TPS report with your conversion rates on it.
Yes, yes. So they measure, how many hours you spent contacting, how many people you're teaching, what lesson they're on, how they're progressing, how many baptisms you've had, all those kinds of things. So you track all that as a companionship, and then you report that to your district leader, and then he aggregates all of his missionaries and reports that to the zone leader, and that aggregates, and the mission president tracks his zone and his whole mission, and he's looking at statistics and trends, and then he tries to do things to influence it positively, and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, so then are there decorations or accolades and things that you can earn while you're out there?
Oh, man. So that's a great example of where they kind of avoid doing that kind of thing.
Well, if you're supposed to be incentivizing these kids to have good statistics, then obviously you have to have some way of motivating them.
So there's a scripture in the Old Testament that compares gathering God's children across the earth to hunting and fishing. And I heard that scripture frequently used because hunting is by ones and twos, and fishing is by hundreds. And some people hunt and some people fish, but none of God's souls are unimportant. So there's this very deliberate effort to not be like, hey, look at Bob over here. He has higher numbers than you.
Okay, so you don't want to... It's less about bringing up the people that are excelling. It's more about keeping up the people who aren't.
Yes.
Okay.
That's a great way to couch it.
Okay.
It's to just help everyone improve and do the best they can. Because some guy, he may be an introvert, he may be kind of quiet and mousy, but he may be the perfect personality to connect with one person that otherwise wouldn't have come. And maybe he's not going to, have 20 baptisms in a month, but the guy that is getting 20 baptisms a month couldn't connect with the same guy. And that's also important too.
I have to take a little interlude from our talk here and have a little meta conversation about this, because as you're describing all this and answering my questions, I'm having a hard time filtering out your bias. Like, you are such an upbeat, positive, good person, and you're painting this in such a rosy picture. I can't tell if it's just legitimately that good or if you're just painting it that way.
Let me tell you a few stories.
Give me some bad stories. This is what I want. I want to hear the nitty gritty. Like, I want to hear some, like, okay, there was a part of the mission that sucked, and here's what it was, and here's why.
Okay, so growing up in the church, you learn the culture of, hey, you young man are preparing to be a missionary. So you need to be righteous, you need to be worthy, you need to learn the doctrines, you need to prepare yourself so that when you turn 19 years of age, you can go wherever the Lord calls you on earth that you need to go and help save God's children all over the earth. And that's ingrained in you from like the time you're born in the church.
That sounds an awful lot like on it from, again, I'm not making any judgments, but it sounds very cultish and very brainwashy when you put it that way, Ben.
Or faithful.
Well, and that's the positive way of spinning it, right? Now we're having a semantic discussion. But
sure.
Either way, keep going.
So I went out expecting that, that everyone was on that kind of path. Maybe the same way in the military, someone that, you get out of basic training, you go out to your unit and they kind of go, forget everything you learned in basic training. That kind of happens a little bit on the mission. I just wasn't prepared for the reality. I'd grown up in my parents' home, and now all of a sudden I was out on my own, just like that. Out living in the world. I had my own apartment. I was with one other guy, and we just had a whole bunch of work to do. And you work. There's missionary work is work. You are out there for 2 full years. You have no vacation time. You work every single day, all day. You're wearing a suit and tie. You're studying. You're proselyting. There's no time off. There's no vacations. You aren't allowed to date. You don't watch movies. You aren't allowed to watch TV. You don't. You can't call home. At the time, you couldn't. You can only call home on Christmas and Mother's Day. You only are allowed to do like preparatory things once a week for a few hours, like shopping and cleaning and laundry and stuff like that, and playing sports and those kinds of things. And when I got out into the field, I was expecting, I don't know, I was just expecting kind of like this pure, refined experience. I wasn't ready for the chaos of working with other 19-year-old boys, and I haven't seen Matt Parker and Trey Stone's vision of this, but I think they do kind of capture kind of accurately this doe-eyed idea that you're just going to go to Africa and save souls, you know?
Yeah, and that's kind of the whole expectations thing, where you're expecting one thing and you get another, and the disparity causes stress and problems.
Yeah. So my trainer was a good man, but he had some flaws. You know, he was, and I wasn't ready for it. Like I just thought everybody was gonna be like me, and you know, sometimes guys get kind of tired of the same thing every day, and so maybe they find ways to do the work that aren't real effective, that still just kind of keeps you busy. Sometimes there's outright mutiny. Sometimes people just aren't doing what they should be doing, or in the worst cases, sometimes really bad things happen. Like occasionally there'll be an instance where like a missionary, does something that's criminal in nature, and then it really hurts the work, and they have to shut down an area and make big changes, and I'm sure the mission president has to send people home and those kinds of things. For me, I'll give a personal example. I got to my first transfer where I met my trainer and was getting ready to go back out, and when I got there was this missionary standing by the doorway, and he was holding a box of razor blades, and he was wearing a dumpy suit with like scuffed up shoes, and he did not look like my vision of a missionary. His tie was wrinkled, and he had a bad haircut, and he was handing out razor blades to every greenie. There was the 15 of us got off the van, and he was handing us each a razor blade as we walked past. And he was like, "There you go, there you go, there you go." And I'm like, "What's this for?" And he goes, "It's so you can slit your wrists."
Ooh, wow. Okay, I don't think you should still be here.
Yeah, exactly. And he was getting ready to go home, and I'm like. And I was in utter shock at the attitude of this guy. Like I said to the guy that had driven us there, I'm like, "What's that guy's problem?" He's like, "Oh, that's Elder so and so. What a loser. He's I don't know why he even came on a mission." And that's a great way to look at it. If he's going to come out, maybe he came from some community back home where like his family and his girlfriend expected him to go serve a mission. He was just doing it because he had to, but he did not have the faith, and he was not into it, and it showed.
Well, devil's advocate, Ben, maybe he just needed somebody to connect with him. Did you ever reach out to Dumpy Elder What's-His-Face?
That was the first and only time I ever saw him.
Okay.
But I never forgot him.
All right, I will absolve you of your responsibility for saving Elder Dumpy Face.
Yeah. So and there were other flavors of that, getting out and realizing that like not everybody's just doing the right thing all the time. Sometimes people make mistakes, whether it's deliberately or by accident, and sometimes they're just kids that are just doing the best they can, but it's not very effective.
You know what? I think you're hitting on a universal truth. I think everybody has experienced this in one form or another in their life, and it's a shocking, eye-opening experience where you're like you said, the doe-eyed, idealistic, naive person going through high school or whenever, and then you get out into the real world, and I'm air quoting again because that happened to me when I went to the academy. It happens to other people when they get their first real job. But I think everybody experiences that disillusion, that realization that the next thing that you're going to isn't necessarily going to be this thing on a pedestal that you thought it was going to be. It's just like normal life, it's just different.
Yeah.
That's a sad realization.
And I don't want to just be like, oh, I was the pristine one. I had my moments of questioning what I was doing, or just being worn out from how hard it was, or those kinds of things. I remember in boot camp, and my companion happened to be going to the same mission as me, but that's not necessarily the case. So we were the only two in our district in Provo, Utah, that were both going to the Oregon-Portland mission, and I didn't really like the guy, but we were busy there at boot camp, and it didn't matter so much that I didn't get along with him. So we get sent out into the field, and on my fifth transfer, we went to the meeting. The mission president said, "Elder Rich, you're going to the Boring, Oregon area, and you will be assigned to serve with Elder Jay Schaefer." And I kind of start.
This is Boring, Oregon, or was it just like that's what was the code name? Was it just super boring there? Was it the name of the town?
Boring is the name of the town.
Oh, okay, got it. Sorry, I couldn't get past that. Go ahead.
Yeah. Boring is the name of the town. And you'll be with L.J. Schaefer. And I kind of started, and I was like, that was my missionary training center companion, and I don't think that's a very good idea. So I was hoping
Did you say that out loud?
Well, no. It's a big meet. Imagine the president standing up on the stand in a meeting hall filled with missionaries.
Ben, I'm imagining you in a freaking crowd of hundreds of
Standing up
people
and being
standing like,
like,
"Oh, sir, I think
"No!"
that's a bad idea. Let me explain to you why," because that's who you are.
No, this isn't that kind of meeting. He's up on the podium and he's just announcing it. So basically, he brings all the missionaries who are going to have a change to a central area, announces the change, and then you stand up and meet your new person and then switch and go back out to a different place than where you came from.
Do you have all your stuff with you? Like, what?
Yes.
Oh, gosh.
Basically, a week before, he says, you're going to be transferred. Get ready to go to the transfer meeting next Monday. And then that Sunday, you pack up all your stuff. And on Monday morning, you get up and go to the transfer building. And then he announces where you're going to switch to, and then you switch and go back out.
What kind of a poundage allowance are you given for your personal effects?
2 suitcases is pretty much it. In some areas of the world, you're just like getting on a train, so you got to be able to travel light. Luckily,
Wow.
you dress like the Men in Black, so it's not real complicated.
Fair enough. Well,
And your supplies stay put, so you don't got to haul supplies around. You just...
I will say this, like there is, that's not necessarily as easy as you think it is, because when Nicole and I pack for a trip for the same duration, like her luggage is half the size of mine because my clothes are literally just twice the size of hers.
You should have had me guess who had bigger luggage.
Oh, please. It's me because we pack the same number of things and she can just fit more into a smaller volume.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, so... Yeah,
Jay Schaefer.
he announced that I was going to be assigned to my missionary training center companion again, and I didn't like that guy. And I hadn't learned to cope with this yet. And I think this is very deliberately, by God, one of the things you're supposed to learn as a missionary.
How to deal with people you hate?
Yeah. You go out and you get randomly assigned to live with 12 people, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you are just with that guy all the time. You are forced to learn to get along with somebody. So I went to him after the meeting. I said, President, did you know that I've already been companions with Elder Schaefer? And he kind of started. He lost his composure, I'd say, for a second. And he's like, oh, really, Elder? When was that? And I said, well, we were missionary training center companions. And then he kind of regained his composure. And he says, Elder, this is what the Lord wants.
Oh, that's such Ben, that's such a cop-out. That's such a cop-out answer.
I know it is.
That's so it's awesome to be able to have that in your back pocket.
Yeah. And so he goes, he's like, so, dude, go ahead. It also meant he didn't want to make a change on the spot because I'm sure that's very complicated logistically to try to do.
I mean, it's such a good, now listen, this isn't my decision. This is God's decision. Now, I can go back and change it, but do you really want me to do that?
Yeah, so I went back with Elder Schaefer, and I tried for about 3 weeks very half-heartedly to get along with him. But he was from Arizona, and
whoa! What does that mean? What does that have any bearing on this conversation?
I don't really get along with people from Arizona.
Man, screw those Arizona people.
So he I just wasn't trying very hard, and I needed to learn a hard life lesson, like a real, actual, earn it the hard way life lesson. And I had a breakdown one day where I was just sick of dealing with him.
So you killed him and buried him in the yard.
Yeah. And then I didn't know what to do with the body. So
okay, you legitimately threw me really hard there when you agreed with me.
What actually happened, I couldn't have done that because he weighed like 250 pounds. I could. One day we'd gone back to the apartment for lunch and we'd been fighting all morning about like what to do. Like he thought we should go one way and I thought we should go another, and we couldn't agree. And we went back to the apartment and we were getting some lunch, and I was just fed up and I stormed out. I didn't tell him. I just kind of walked out of the apartment, closed the door quietly, and went for a walk.
Oh, you stormed out by sneaking away.
So the second I closed the door, I was in violation of the mission rules. I was now separated from my companion.
And this was the 4th or 5th time in your life that you had broken a rule.
No, there's lots of mission rules, man. There's lots.
Okay, but yeah, you are in violation of the companionship dealio. And so
right,
how did that
you got to stay together.
Yeah. How did this go?
So I went for a walk. I was probably gone for a grand total of about 4 hours before I finally was just like, I don't want to like go completely nuclear here and like demand that I be transferred or something like that. I need to learn to get along with this guy. I need to soften my heart. I need to be forgiving. I need to focus on his good points. I need to be more flexible and make this work because it's important and I need to do it. So,
wow.
I turned around and went back to the apartment. And by the time I got in there, he'd already called the leadership because we didn't carry cell phones or anything like that. And the district leaders had shown up, and the mild panic and had ensued. But everybody calmed down. I think I got a black mark in the mission president's book, which probably affected my trajectory for leadership the rest of my mission. But everybody calmed down. Everything went back to normal. I stayed with Elder Schaefer, and after that, we got along. I was really transformed.
Wow, that is far more maturity than I would expect any 19-year-old to show.
But you can't. I've realized this about watching my own son go through it. Is that I couldn't have set up the laboratory to have him learn a lesson like that at home. Like it really is the fact that you're away from home, you're living on your own, you've got all this responsibility that sets up these situations where you're developing that kind of maturity that you just can't synthesize.
That is a really hard life lesson. And frankly, in your shoes, I would not have learned it. Like, I would not have been able to change the way that you expressed that you did. So,
and that probably happens every day. I bet, the mission president has to make emergency transfers where two guys just, to prevent a homicide, he just has to make a move really fast.
Because we are talking about 19-year-old boys that aren't allowed to interact with women. So
yeah,
there's a lot of pent-up aggression there.
There's fist fights that break out. There's, shouting matches. And, if it gets dangerous, they'll be like, all right, we'll take these two people in this companion, and we'll take one of them and make them we'll add them to another nearby companionship, and we'll take the other guy, we'll add him to another nearby companionship, and we'll work it out. And sometimes you end up like that where there's just an odd number. You can't have a full set of pairs and you have a threesome, and that's an interesting dynamic, but that's something else.
Have you been in a threesome before, Ben?
Right next to my companion that was buried in the yard.
That was a fun question for me to ask. I was going to, I have to say that I think if missionaries came to my door and they clearly hated each other's guts, I would be more interested in having them talk for longer. It's like if they both have that same painted on smile and are just pushing the message, I have no interest. But if one of them is making snarky comments or scoffing under his breath at everything the other one says, I'm going to keep this going for a couple minutes, see where it goes.
Yeah, missionaries are real people. When I got to Bend, Oregon, I was assigned to Waiseli Panisi, who was Tongan. And he was just this 6'3" wall of solid muscle. He was on the varsity high school football team, and he was very Tongan in his approach to life, which I didn't know at the time, but I'm very accustomed to now. And when Christmas came around, he called home, he spoke Tongan to his grandma on the phone. I don't even know what
Tongan is. I'm assuming this is Africa?
Polynesia.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah, think Samoan. Like that.
That's cool.
But there's a lot of tension between Tongans and Samoans. He was very Samoan racist.
Are you allowed to be racist as a mission?
We were our primary form of transportation while I was assigned with Elder Panisi was bicycle. And he had this old quadruple hand-me-down bike because his family didn't have a lot of money, and it was stuck in the highest gear. And his legs were so powerful, he would just get on that thing and disappear into the distance.
And you with your single speed.
And I was like,
pedal for all you're worth.
I can't keep up.
This is a good this is a good segue back into kind of more logistic territory, out of the touchy-feely stuff. And where did you freaking live?
Okay. So, and this also goes back to why they centralized the money where everybody pays in. Because what was happening is you would go out and you would always have to find a new place to live, but they would change where you were assigned. So every time you would move, you'd have to find a new apartment, you'd have to pay your utility connection fees and all that kind of stuff. And there was just a lot of overhead associated with it. So what they did basically is they establish a missionary apartment in each geographic area you're assigned to that is your home base. And so you rotate out one at a time, so you always just maintain the lease on that apartment. The mission president pays all the leases. The mission president's office pays all the leases and all the utilities for all the apartments for the 100 apartments that he owns in his mission.
I just assumed that had to have been how it was originally, but you're saying that it wasn't when you were out in the in the wild.
When my father-in-law was out, they had to just find a place to live wherever they went.
Oh, that sounds
Or
terrible.
Even if they moved into the same apartment the old missionaries had, because the utilities were in their name, they would have to switch them over and pay all the reconnection fees.
That's absurd.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, ugh. All right. So you're out doing the mission. Like, tell me, I want to hear, like, so your job is like 24/7, aside from the TPS reports, you actually got to be out there pushing the sales. So
Yeah.
is this just door-to-door salesman? Do you look for opportunities at like crowded events or?
All of the above. So your daily activities are kind of governed by the geographic constraints of the area you are, but the area you're assigned to, it has very specific geographic boundaries, and you're not to leave those boundaries. And depending on how big or small the area is, that also changes what form of transportation is allotted to you. In the Oregon-Portland mission, public transportation wasn't really much of an option. So you're either in a car area or a bike area, and you inherited basically a car that the church owned, or you brought your own bike, or you're on foot. Whoa. And every day you followed a schedule. You were supposed to get up at 7 a.m. or 6:30, I can't remember, and then you were supposed to spend about the first hour and a half a day studying. And if you're in a foreign language mission, it would be double that, and you would also have language study time. And then by 9 o'clock, you're supposed to be dressed, fed, washed, and ready to go, and you step out the door at 9 a.m. sharp. Don't stay in the apartment any longer than that. And then the regular activities begin. You're kind of constrained by availability of people. Like if you're walking around in the middle of the day trying to street contact people, you're only getting like unemployed people or housewives. And you can't go in the house alone with a housewife. So it's not...
What do they expect to happen?
Whatever, you're avoiding the appearance of impropriety.
I love how uncomfortable you got with that question. Please continue.
So... there's the unstructured things you can use to fill your time where you don't have appointments, where you're doing street contacting, you're doing tracting. There's just a lot of transportation. You volunteer for community service. I've worked in libraries, old folks' homes, elementary schools. We do actual service where like for instance, one time my companion and I were out in a neighborhood and there was this couple frantically loading a moving van in the rain, and we just stopped and helped them finish loading their moving van. Sometimes we cut out blackberry brambles for neighborhoods, or we helped old people cross the street. I mean, just anything you can imagine that was the kind of thing Christ did in the New Testament. Helping people, teaching people.
I'm glad there are people in the world like you to offset the people in the world like me.
Josh, you have this straw man that is this narcissistic, self-centered person that you describe, but it's not you.
Yeah, don't you dare tear down my straw man, Ben. Like this is the image I want our podcast listeners to have of me. I'm a terrible human being, and that's what makes this such a great dynamic. All right. So of all those things, at the time we also had media referrals. They've transformed a bit, but at the time the church had an ad campaign on like cable TV where call this number and we'll send you a free copy of the Book of Mormon or this video about how to have a better family. But what they don't tell you when you call the 800 number is guess who's delivering the copy of the Book of Mormon or the video that you called for. So you got like a small box of the Books of Mormon or
yes.
Just some list like go here's your deliveries for the day.
Yeah, it doesn't. People thought when they called the 800 number that the copy of the Book of Mormon would come in the package in the mail. Oh no!
Oh,
the missionaries
that's
are coming to your
tricky.
door.
Like, you don't realize, but you just signed yourself up for a weekly visit for the rest of your life.
The missionaries are coming to your door. You have expressed interest.
We have your name.
So we also have a local congregation we are assigned to. For me, it was always two, and they would be in a single meeting house, and they would cover the geographic area we were in, and we were their proselyting arm. So all the local members, if they had a friend that they wanted to join the church, we were the ones that taught them. If they had someone that they thought might be interested in the gospel, they would introduce us to them. So we also had a responsibility to build a relationship of trust with the local congregation.
Jerk, you introduced me to the freaking elders the one time I went to your church in Virginia.
It's because I believe it, Josh.
Oh, I thought you did it just because they walked up and you did it out of politeness. No, you knew what you were doing. All right, so everybody listening, here's the takeaway for today is like, it seems like they're nice. They know everything that they're doing.
I've said this to you before, Josh. I'm going to say it again for the sake of our listeners. I proselyte to you because I believe it's true, and because I like you. And those two things can't be separated.
Ben, have I told you my thing about religion?
Go ahead.
Okay, so I know I'm going to hell, and I'm just working to try to be hell cadre. Like, I just want to be recruited.
You want to be in the leadership.
Yeah, there you go. I want to be the, like, hey, you don't need to be down here getting tortured. We want you in, like, middle management somewhere. That's what I'm going for.
Well, I haven't given up on you yet, so.
Somebody had. Thanks, Ben. It's you and Nicole.
Okay.
I think that those are the two left.
Yeah. So
we're moving on. All right. So this is your schedule. You are the local proselytizing. I can't even say that word. Proselyting arm of the local congregation. So there's kind of the ties to the locals. You get moved around. You have the daily schedule. You have your deliveries to make. You have your 1-800 number of people to accost. And then when this is all said and done, and you're moved around, and you're finished, and you have just pounded the pavement for your 2 years, how do you get reintegrated back into real life? How do they bring you back from deployment and like reintegrate you into the society?
So that's an interesting thing because some people don't make it so smoothly. And I remember when I went to basic training, about the last week they started to relax the standards, because they have you really on edge. Military basic training, they have you really on edge. They're making you use reporting statements and stand at attention all the time and march in formation. And about the last week they kind of relax it. And they said that was a new introduction when I was there, because what was happening is they were sending these basic training recruits out in the world, and they were so high strung that they couldn't even function.
Yeah, because they get out there and then they're snapping at attention every time somebody walks in the door. And it's like, dude, you have got to relax. We have work to do.
Okay, so let me give you a good example of how this happens to missionaries. So for 2 years, you're not dating, but you're still a 19-year-old young man. You're still feeling all the things and stuff. Maybe you're writing a girlfriend.
All the things and stuff.
maybe you're writing back to a girlfriend back home. Although there's this cultural oddity surrounding girls who wait for missionaries for 2 years and the potential to get a Dear John letter. I'm guessing that's depicted in the Book of Mormon musical. I don't know if it was or not, but I'm assuming at some point somebody gets a Dear John letter.
That happens all the time.
Yeah. But anyway. What was happening is that missionaries were going home and they were so high strung with the mission rules, which is you don't look at girls, you don't talk to girls, you don't write to girls, you don't get too close to girls. And you go home and they just want you to go back to normal life. They release you from all that.
You have trained 19-year-old kids to be afraid of women. They're already afraid of women and you just made it worse.
Well, there's the other aspect of that, and that's for 2 years we've been teaching people the importance of fraternal families. We've been teaching them that they should get married, that they should be loyal to their family, that they should raise them up in the gospel, and that's how people are happy in the world.
So you got 19-year-old boys that are skipping like the dating process, and they just want to go straight to having 3 kids.
Well,
that's what happened to you, isn't it? Tell me your story about how you had kids in college, Ben.
I'm getting to that. So, at the end of your mission, you're basically released. And there's parts of it they want you to retain and parts of it they want you to set aside. The retained parts are that they want you to be faithful and have a lifelong habit of studying the gospel and continue sharing the gospel even though you're not doing it the way you were as a missionary, but kind of just living your life in a way where you share the gospel of Jesus Christ with other people.
Well, hang on. You skipped the part where they bring you back. Like, is there a stopping point?
So
do they debrief?
You get to the end of your mission. They bring in somebody to replace you. They bring you to the mission home. The mission president says, "Good job. I'm proud of you. We're going to send you back home. Your family meet you at the airport." And there's rituals at both ends of that that are kind of cultural in the church. The one that ran afoul of the coronavirus, where you come home triumphant from your 2 years of service, and your family meets you at the airport with signs and banners welcoming you home and cheers for you. Your local congregation that sent you and supported you while you're away has you come and give a speech, over the pulpit about what you learned during your 2 years. And you are now branded amongst the Latter-day Saint community as a return missionary. This is a badge of honor and also a badge of eligibility for marriage.
Oh, so twofold. One, you got that war ribbon, that combat veteran medal. But then also, you are now even more desirable for having served.
Yes, because you're not supposed to get married before you go on a mission. You're expected to serve a mission before you get married.
It is a public declaration of, ladies, I'm back.
I'm on the market.
And boy, howdy, have I been repressed for these past 2 years.
So, and not only that, but for the past 2 years, you've been telling people the importance of getting married and having a righteous family.
So how? Okay, so this is making a lot more sense. Why you proposed to your wife like 3 months after you met her?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's kind of embarrassing to recount to an audience of potentially, non-members who are listening to this. But, I got home, I met my wife at church. We dated for about 2 months, and then I proposed, and we were married another 2 months later.
Which makes perfect sense when you can surround it with everything that had been indoctrinated into you up to that point.
Yeah.
Oh, Ben.
And there's some assumed. I mean, we met at church and we had a lot in common, so it wasn't just like she was this completely unknown quantity. She'd kind of been screened through a lifetime of church activity herself.
Oh, goodness.
So it wasn't
gracious.
just like, I met some girl on a weekend and we got married in Vegas. Now, not to say that kind of thing never goes wrong, but my wife and I have been married happily for 21 years now.
Oh, we'll have to have her on someday because I want to ask her questions about how you stalked her for those first 2 months.
So one thing that her and I have admitted to our chagrin is, that maybe some growing up that people need to do to really be able to participate into a well-adjusted marriage, we had to do after we were married that maybe some people do before they get married.
I think there is an amount of adjustment that every married couple has to go through, just adjusting from single life to married life. But like adding that complication of you're still trying to figure out who you are as a person, like through those formative years where you're out of your parents' house and really get to explore the world on your own. Yeah, that could make things more complicated.
Now, like you'd observed that, like I had that moment where I had to learn to get along with a companion I had to be with and couldn't choose to get away from. Those kinds of lessons really transfer well into marriage. Like learning to get along with
somebody that you just can't stand.
Yeah, because my companions were assigned. When I got home, I got to choose my companion. I got to pick somebody I wanted. Then it was a lot easier to overlook faults and forgive for perceived wrongdoing.
For some reason, whenever you talk about stuff like that, you always sound like you're such a saint, and it's so gracious of you to put up with Alicia.
I'm a jerk, man. I don't know how she gets along with me.
Okay. One thing I do want to ask, though, this is random and kind of flippant, but do the missionaries that go overseas, the ones that actually go to like the war-torn Civil War South American jungle places, do they get like a higher veteran status? Do they get like an MSM where you got like a Distinguished Cross or whatever? Like, is it more prestigious?
So it's not supposed to be the case, but it definitely is. Like, there's no denying that in the church, there's like, oh yeah, well you just went to Colorado, but he went to South America.
That's one of those things. It's unspoken, but it's like, oh, where'd you go on your mission? Oh, I went to Oregon. Oh, I was in. I was in like
back
Uganda.
And they've lost 40 pounds. They speak another language fluently. They probably have a tapeworm. It's like it's legit.
That's cool. Yeah, this is funny because this is a difference that me and my brother always make, because my wife and I both went to a combat deployment, and he didn't. Like his one deployment was to Mississippi to teach ASBC, I think.
Yeah,
for a while.
It's same.
Yeah, and so we kind of give him crap for like, oh, you were in the Air Force, but were you really? That's funny. All right,
Yeah.
so put a bow on this whole thing for us, Ben. What is, like, obviously, like, you are a proponent of the missionary system. I'm going to let you go first, and then I'm going to give you my overall thoughts on this.
Okay. All right. So 2 things. 1, my life, and 2, now experiencing it as a parent. So in my life, I was everything you could expect of a 19-year-old boy who'd been raised Christian, but who really just needed to grow up. Like at a time in someone's life when someone might be, experimenting with drugs and alcohol and, pledging a frat, I was out very deliberately trying to serve other people.
So boring.
I would. But you know what? What? Even though I didn't understand at the time the vision of what I was doing, someone said to me once, serve faithfully and well every day of your mission and enjoy it for the rest of your life. And not a day goes by where I don't benefit from something I did or learned during that 2 years of missionary service. For reaching out to others, for building my own faith, for learning to be forgiving, all those kinds of things are a part of my life now because of that sacrifice I made to give up 10% of my life up to that point to serve the Lord. I believed it then, and I believe it now. I believe that Christ lives and that doing that was what he wanted me to do. So that's from my perspective. Now, as a father, I'm watching my own sons go through this. My oldest son's about to come home from his missionary service in California, and to see the transformation he went through exceeded my expectations. Like I knew what I'd gone through, and I thought he would go through the same, but I didn't know what he would look like as a young man turning into a grown man as he was going through this. But it's absolutely astounded me, Josh. Just the growth and the leadership he's shown, his ability to overcome challenges. I mean, he just got an appendectomy a couple of weeks ago. Has astounded me, and I think I can't recommend it highly enough for it, as the magnitude of the sacrifice that it is only exceeded by the magnitude of the blessings that it brings to the lives of those that do it. Now, there's one other thing I haven't talked about, and I have to talk about it. I know you kind of avoided it, but there was 17 souls that I saw baptized while I was out there. People who were who opened their heart to the message that I had to bring and listened to what I had to say. And many of them have stayed in touch with me to this day and thanked me for what I did back then for bringing them the gospel of Jesus Christ.
I have no comment. No, that is legitimately from the perspective of personal growth, and then as a father looking at your son, like I can appreciate that. Like experiencing that yourself, and then having one of your offspring experience that. I can only imagine like the satisfaction that brings to see that kind of development happen in your kids. Like I see little things that my son does here and there, and it brings me joy. And so I can't imagine like how compounded and exponentially more important that would be from your perspective as a father. And then I can, from a conceptual standpoint, I can understand the importance of making that kind of a connection spiritually with another person. And good on you for doing what you did, for your service. Now, do you mind if I put my perspective on this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So everything that we've discussed has been very interesting and very eye-opening, and it is a far more elaborate, and it's just a much bigger thing than I thought it was originally. But it also just completely and totally reinforces the idea that one day we're going to wake up and it's going to be just the most polite world takeover that we've ever experienced. And I have told you this before, that when I wake up one morning and find the news headlines read that the Mormons have taken over the planet, I'm not going to be surprised. And this is just one more bullet point in my support system. On a completely voluntary basis, we have your faith has built a system of indoctrinating, like in hardcore training, and just ignore what they're actually doing and just look at the logistics of the situation. You have a global infrastructure for training and distributing these individuals to serve a purpose. It's already built in. It's already built into your faith. Like expanding that into an armed military structure, it'd be almost trivial at this point. Like, you guys are going to take over the planet, and you're going to be so polite about it that no one's really going to understand what happened.
Yeah, well, you're still on my list, Josh.
If anything else, it'll protect me. I was like, nah, he's still potential. There's something there. No, thank you for sharing that experience. It was very interesting to hear about.
Thanks for asking me about it. I was looking. I enjoyed the experience of being able to tell you all that.
All right, wrap it up, Ben. Do your podcast wrap-up thing. You're better at it than I am.
All right. Well, thanks to our listeners for coming, hanging in for this today. I guess if there's a theme of the Bad at Magic podcast, it's that you never know what Josh and I are going to be talking about. So hopefully you're interested in learning something new about another area of life that maybe you didn't know about, or maybe if you're a member of the church and you did know about, maybe you've got some comments or something to add. So join in the discussion. We've got our Facebook page, Bad at Magic, as well as a subreddit, and we'll start threads for these. And I'll put in some artifacts, maybe some photos of me serving as a missionary, and some of the memes that we reference and those kinds of things. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can go to patreon.com/badatmagic and throw some support our way. And as always, you can go to our website, download past episodes and join in on the fitness challenge. And so thanks for being a listener.
Yeah, through these troubling times, we are here to support you with random conversations about things that probably don't really matter.